Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DXP P21 podcast program. My name is Al Hughes, and today we're going to illustrate all aspects of EDI. This includes both incoming EDI from customers and outgoing EDI, which DXP uses to send POs to the vendors. So we'll talk about a lot of different information, and we'll start with incoming EDI information, where the customer sends us orders. And we'll show you how you can get to that EDI Air application and open up the customer's order and view the header information. And you'll also see that you can double click on the order header to open up the line details. We'll review the description and the different detail fields that are in that screen. And we'll also have some where we do some searching to try to identify item IDs. We'll talk about maybe supplier IDs when you're trying to add an item on the fly. And when it's all identified, we'll go ahead and just click the process button to drop that order into P21 onto the sales order. So the second part of our training is going to be outgoing EDI orders, and this would be the ones that most of you would use the PO wizard. So that, in other words, you'd be in the order entry screen, and when you hit save, the PO wizard would open up. And we'll go do a couple of those steps. It's very, very simple and easy to pick up, so most of you probably already understand it well. But keep in mind, everybody, that our vendors really want us to use the EDI application wherever possible. Because if they go to the trouble to set up EDI and we don't use it, it's a lot of work they do for nothing. And let's just say that maybe we send 1,000 purchase orders to a vendor in a 6-month period. Occasionally, they evaluate us. And if out of 1,000 orders we sent to them, maybe we only used EDI 300 times, or maybe we used it 900 times. But keep in mind that the more we use EDI, the more likely they'll be to give us better discounts in the preceding months. So we're also going to go into the vendor maintenance screen. And I'll show you an EDI profile there that helps you identify if a vendor really is an EDI vendor. And we'll go to supplier maintenance and we'll look at some notes in there. We'll jump into the email screen and show you some email alerts you get when you send an EDI PO. We'll also click on the document links tab to show you various information that can appear in there. And there's also a place in the PO wizard where you can put details about quote information that you want to send with that PO. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go into the Operational Excellence portal now. And you should all be familiar with this portal, because I think it's where most of you go when you might be going to work some reports. And for various reasons, you should have already been in this screen dozens of times, On the right, there's a lot of good reference information, but we're going to talk about right now is this middle column. And in here are a lot of individual SOPs that tell you how to do certain steps. And I'm going to click on order processing, because in there are the SOPs for EDI. And actually, there's a whole lot of other SOPs, but when I click on this SOP option, you'll see they're listed in alphabetical order. And the EDI ones, there's actually 3 of them here. This second one deals with incoming EDIs from the customer. The third one is outgoing EDIs that we send to the vendor. And this first one is just, it deals specifically with EDI communications. So it might have to do with how you put in quote information, or just the various ways that the vendors communicate with us via EDI. So I'm going to open the second one here, because that's got some good information that I want to show you here. So in this incoming EDI SOP, you can see there's a link up here. And if you click on that link, it's going to take you into the EDI Air application. So we're going to go into that application in a minute, but I just wanted you to know that if you haven't been in there before, this is how you get to it, and then you save it with a favorite. This first picture shows when you first open up the EDI Air application, and it's going to show all the order headers from the customer. And this second picture shows the line item detail where we might have to identify items. And in the far right there in the blue box, that's the item on the fly. So just keep in mind that most anything you can do in the order entry screen, you can do in EDI. You can do a search and enter part numbers, and you can add them on the fly. And we're going to go ahead and do that. But down here, you can see that process button you would click when you were all done. And I'm not going to go through all the SOPs because we have limited time, but what I am going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and go into the actual EDI Air application. And this is a play system we have set up here. So now I'm going into the actual incoming EDI application. And I'm going to start by just, all this is the header information. So it's got order numbers, customer PO numbers, line item information, dates it came. Well, I'm just going to start with this one because it's got one line on it. And when it opens up, you're going to see that that one line is totally identified already. And just keep in mind that our national accounts team does some work up front when a customer wants to come online with EDI. So what they do is they get a list of all the customer part numbers from that customer on a spreadsheet. And then our national accounts team goes in and loads our P21 item ID that matches each one of those. And they try to identify all of them. And then that gets imported to P21. So anytime the customer sends us an order that has their customer part number on it, if we've done that homework up front, it automatically populates here. So I'm going to jump over here for just a second to the, and this is the play system in P21, but you can see that that order I was just looking at in EDI, it also exists in the order entry screen, but only the header is there. There's no line items on it. So when that customer sends us that order into EDI application, it creates this header with the hold line on it. And when we go back in here, if all this is identified and we just hit process, that drops it right into that P21 screen. So in a minute, we're going to do some other orders where the item is not identified, but let me just hit process. Because that's all identified, the screen's going to go back to the main header screen, and this order just dropped in to that P21 order entry screen. And it's telling me I have a price mismatch. And keep in mind, that's going to show up a lot. But notice it says price does not match. Price changes need to be made in P21. So what it's saying is that after you release it, you go into P21 and fix your price. Now, it depends on who the customer is, whether we accept the customer's price or our price. And it depends on how those prices got loaded into our system. So your manager would tell you whether you need to accept the customer's price or go into P21 and change it. It depends, again, on who the customer is and how accurate the information they have that they send over. So I'm going to go now to another order in the system here. And this one has 7 lines on it. And when I open it up here, you can see this first line is not identified. So let's take a second here and look up in the header, or excuse me, up in the top part of this screen. It's got all kinds of information up here, and here's that customer part number, but evidently they've added a customer part number since they've come on board, and this item is not identified. So we have to look at the information and go in here and identify it. And notice up here in the top of this same screen, there's 2 check boxes. One says create a customer part number link to our DXP part number, and the other is about notification for contract pricing. So if we add a new part here, which is what we're going to do now, we may want to click those two boxes, because if we add a new part and click that box, the next time they order this, it's going to automatically populate because we're telling them to add it here. And if we're sure our price is right, we would click that and they would update the contract pricing. So here's what I'm going to do. I know this is a C4016 chain coupling from Dodge. I kind of researched this before this, so I'm going to click in the search window. I kind of know what I want to search for, and I'm just going to put in part of that number. So it's a 100490, but I just want to show you a little bit about how the search works. So when I put in just part of it and hit search, you can see that a whole bunch of items pop up here, and I'm looking for the 100490, so there it is, and I just select it, and it populates there, which is good. And now I'm going to go click up there so that next time it comes through, that will automatically populate for me. And I want them to research and update the customer contract pricing, so I click on this. So now I'm going to go, and by the way, look down here where it says 1 of 7. There's 7 lines on here, and I'm working the first line. So if I didn't know what this one was and it wasn't populated, I could just hit skip and go to line 2. And I can release, out of these 7 lines, I can release 3 of them today and maybe 3 of them tomorrow, or 3 of them now and 3 of them in an hour, you know. You don't have to have them all. You can do them as you go. So I'm going to go ahead and hit process. And it's going to move to the second line. It's telling me here there's not a price match and that it needs to be changed in P21. I'm going to click OK. So now it's going to move to 2 of 7. And it takes just a few seconds, especially where I'm in the play system. It might take a few seconds longer. So now, okay, it says 1 of 6. So instead of 2 of 7, I was wrong. So there's only 6 lines left, and we're on 1 of those 6 lines left. And I'm going to go ahead and do a search here too. And on this one, again, I researched it a little bit, and I'm just going to put in part of the part number. And we'll show you how to search and do that. And in a minute, we're going to do a whole new item on the fly. Here. So there it is, the Flex 1599. I'm going to select it. I've accepted it. I'm going to go ahead, and this time I'll just add that one. I'll say I want to mix it, make it identifiable. Of course, I could do this as well. And that just means that somebody's going to research and make sure that gets set up with contact pricing down the road. I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to hit process. And it's going to move to my third item. So on the third item, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to say that we have the third item is not a standard item in our system. So it's going to be like if you were adding an item on the fly in P21. And I'm just going to do this. I'm going to go in here and make up a part number because I want to be sure it's an item on the fly. And I'm just going to put test, because I know that won't be in there. And I'm going to click create on the fly. I'm going to select a product group for that. I'm going to put in a supplier ID. And now I'm going to try to add it. I'm going to put in a unit of measure too. And I might not be matching theirs. Let's see what their unit of measure is. Doesn't have anything there because I guess it wasn't identified. So I'm just going to choose this, and I've got to put a cost in there as well. And of course I'm making up this part number, but if I wanted to put extra description in or something, I'm just going to put in test here. Now I'm going to try to add or process this, and if something's still missing, when I hit process, it's going to think a second, and then it's going to give me some red font up here. So let's see what happens when I hit process. And there it is. It wants an EDI item description. I didn't put anything in there, so I'll put something there. And I'll go ahead and hit process again. And if I'm still missing something, something else is going to turn red. But if it worked, there I have a price mismatch because I made up the part number. But I did that because I wanted to do an item on the fly. So I'm going to click OK. And now it's going to move to one of 4 items because I'm down to 4 items left. Let's just do this one more time. Let's just go in here and do TYLK, and I'm just going to do play. Again, I'm going to go up here and create an item on the fly. I'll put my description in, my product group, which I'm totally making up, the supplier ID, which this is the valid supplier ID for that vendor. I'll go with each here. Cost, I'm just going to say $5. And if there was some extra description, maybe I could put that in as well here. So now all that should be populated. I'm going to go ahead and try this now by just hitting process. Oh, you know what? If I was sure that was right, I could also be clicking this. So I'll hit process. No red font yet, and there's the price mismatch thing. And keep in mind, oftentimes we have our prices loaded in P21, and sometimes the customers, what they load in there on their price, depending on who the customer is, sometimes they don't update their pricing. They just always have whatever they paid before. And if a contract got renewed, theirs wouldn't be accurate. So it just depends whether you're going to accept their pricing or not. So anyway, I've worked through several lines here, and these would have all dropped in, and there's still a couple left, but I can go ahead and skip and move to the next one and skip again, or I can just hit exit. So now the only things that dropped into P21 were those lines that I identified. And if you look up here, that order originally had 7 lines, and now it says there's just 3 lines left. And maybe after lunch, I might go back and process the other 3, or maybe it'll be tomorrow or whatever. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how we would send purchase orders to the vendors, because this was just how we receive EDI customer orders from the customer. So now I'm going to switch over here to an order entry screen. And I'll go ahead and use this PO, and I kind of set these up beforehand. So you can see that some of these aren't ordered from the vendor yet because they're white over here. And I'm going to go ahead, and since this is an order that's already been keyed prior, I have to click this checkbox that says create PO. And when I hit save, of course, the PO wizard's going to start appearing. Well, most of you have used the PO wizard over and over and over again. But if you haven't used it when sending an EDI, there's just very small differences, and I'm just going to show you that now. So I'll go ahead and hit save here. And after I hit save, now the PO wizard's going to start appearing. And by the way, I'm in play still. So here it's all familiar to you, I'm sure, that the way this happens. So everything that was on there that needs to be purchased is popping up here. And when I hit next, it's going to allow me to tag them with PO numbers and how the carrier is going to be handled and so forth. But let me show you something first here. Up here it says notes for item. Well, let's just say right now it's highlighted on the first line. Let's say that one, there's a quote from the vendor and I'm sending it via EDI. Even if I wasn't sending it VDI, you could put it in the notes in here anyway. So it's a practice that's good anytime. And I'm going to type here, quote. And then I'm going to go over here and do a drop down and just type Q so that it moves to quote. And right in here, I would put whatever that quote number is. And then I don't know that it's absolutely necessary, but I highlight print purchase order. Whoops, I hit the wrong thing there. I'm going to deselect all. Now, print purchase order, and I'm going to go select, and that just adds that one over. And then I want it to appear also in purchase order processing. You can click any of these you really want, but if you want it to go through on EDI, it's good to at least have these 2 selected. I think it helps. So I can click OK. And now that information is there, so I can go back to this tab. And of course, if I want to add any on these others, I would highlight those lines and do that as well. But I'm just going to go ahead and go next. And now it's going to move to the next page that shows the supplier PO numbers. And the important thing you need to realize is that if this is an EDI vendor, if the vendor I'm buying from is profiled as an EDI vendor, you're going to see that EDI is checked here. So look at this column right here. They're automatically checked. And of course, we always want to try to send them via EDI. And there are a few exceptions. If it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and this is a next day error, and you're calling it in, pleading with them to get it out the door on time, you wouldn't send an EDI because it would have to be called in. If you send an EDI, of course, it would go out. They would ship it the next day. But only in those cases where it's late like that would you do that. So everything pretty much for EDI is very similar to when you're doing a non-EDI order, except for that if you have quotes, be sure you're keying that quote information in. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit finish, and all of these are going to get sent out via EDI, and I'll go ahead and do that now. So there's several things that I want to show you peripherally that apply to EDI. And I want to start by going over here to the actual, to Outlook, and we're going to look at some actual EDI emails that come. So first of all, we can see here it says it's an EDI purchase order and it gives the number. And if I open that up, it's just an email I get every time I send a PO to the vendor. I should get this email. And I don't know, I'm guessing within 10 minutes it would appear in your incoming email. It might vary on certain days, but that's just an email that you will get if you send the PO. Now, there's also an acknowledgement email you'll get. So a lot of vendors send us acknowledgements when we send the PO to them via EDI. And in this case, it's sending me the acknowledgement, and I can click on this and it just opens up, tells me what they show getting. And notice it's even got our cost. Here's the P21 cost. And if there's a problem, it would have a different cost here. And of course, then you'd know that that's the cost from the vendor, and you would know you had a problem. Now, when you send them EDI, normally they update our cost as well, but this helps alert you to that. So there's still a few other Outlook emails we might get. And let me just show you another one here. Here's one where we sent the PO, they acknowledged it, and now they're shipping it, and it's an advanced shipping notice. So a nice thing about getting this is that you get the tracker number in there too, and it tells what day it shipped. I think oftentimes it even tells the level of shipment. So that's all helpful information. And there's various other things that might happen. So here's one that has a bad unit of measure, so it's just alerting you about that. And then let's look at another one here. This is one that you won't get. This one doesn't necessarily come from the vendor. It's kind of an internal email that we use. So when you went to release the Wizard PO, and by the way, I didn't go in and talk about some of the other fields on the Wizard because I assume you already know how to use the PO Wizard, and the only difference is that the EDI checkbox was checked. But in those Wizard line items, there was the option to change the carrier. So it defaulted to a certain carrier and a certain account number. I probably should have pointed that out at that time. But if you have any kind of problem here that makes the system think you didn't identify this with the correct carrier, this is just telling you, look out, the vendor might not have received this information properly, and you need to look into your PO and see if you profiled it correctly. And sometimes just some bad characters up here can do that. If you have, a special character like that pound key, that can cause the system to think that it breaks up, and some vendors don't receive anything following the special character, so they wouldn't get that account number. Excuse me. So anyway, those are some emails you might get. I'm going to show you a couple other things you need to be aware of here. So here is the actual purchase order screen, purchase order entry screen, and just want you to be aware that there are some things that appear on your PO shortly after you send it via EDI. So in the same way you got that email telling with the acknowledgement information, when that email comes, it stamps your PO with this acknowledgement information too. And it tells you that, hey, this PO went via EDI at this time of day, and here's your acknowledgement. And also in the header of your purchase order, there is a document links screen. So if I click on this document links, here is the actual thing that tells me, or the link that tells me what I sent to them. So this is just like the email we were looking at. And notice it has their cost and our cost. And there's an advanced shipping notice here. So there's multiple places where you can go and look and see that information. It can be in an email, it can be in the notes of your PO, or it can be in your document links. That same information, I want to say that again, it can come in your email, it can be in the actual PO notes, or it can be in the document links. So that's one nice thing about sending things via EDI, there's good communication that goes on between the vendor and us. And I'm going to go back over here to the actual screen here for a second. And I just want to point out some of these buttons down here. That's what I hit process to process them. This was on the incoming EDIs. I hit skip to the next line. If I just want to exit, I exit. And these two archive buttons, let's talk about those for a second. This should be the non-standard. I mean, you should almost never have to use these archive buttons. But we do have some customers that have high maintenance needs once in a while. So maybe they're doing maintenance on a Sunday and the maintenance man calls and says, hey, we're broke down. I need this part right now. And you just jump into the order entry screen and you key the part they need and you print it on a pick ticket without a proper PO number because the maintenance guy couldn't give you a PO number. So you put it on a pick ticket, but you don't invoice it. And Monday comes and sometimes maybe it's late in the day Monday, maybe it's even Tuesday, and it comes through in the EDI. Well, you've already got it on a pick ticket out there in the P21 screen. So any kind of information that's on here, you manually key it onto that P21 screen, and then you can archive the line or you can archive the entire order if it's got 8 lines on it or something and they're all on one PO number. And all that does is remove them from this EDI Air application because you've already keyed them. And of course, that shouldn't be a standard thing you do because hopefully you're not getting emergency orders all the time. I know some of you probably do. But keep in mind that each of these lines that comes through on an EDI, on this EDI application, could be carrying department code information, GL information for the maintenance man who ordered it. So it's always good to release it from here so that that information automatically drops into our order and you don't have to go into every line in your P21 screen and try to add it. So just to review for a second, back here is where those SOPs are at. They're in our Operational Excellence portal. And again, we do both incoming and outgoing EDIs, and they're located right under order processing. So hopefully this was a little bit helpful to you. And be aware that there's multiple other podcasts out there on DXP University. So don't be afraid to look into them. So thanks to everyone for attending, and we'll see y'all on the next call.